Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time of day you are watching this little devotion. I hope it finds you well. And that God's peace is with you. There was an essay written some 70 years ago from C.S. Lewis in 1948. It was soon after World War II. And it was entitled On Living in the Atomic Age. Fascinating article. Now think about that time for a moment that C.S. Lewis was living in. It's the beginning of the Cold War, a few years after the cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had been bombed. And now for the first time in a very real way, human history was living under the threat of a human holocaust. And the reality and the tensions between Russia and the democratic nations of the West. Imagine living in London in 1948, soon after World War II and after the Battle of Britain, and your city is just destroyed. And now you're living under the threat of nuclear holocaust. Imagine. C.S. Lewis, one of the premier theologians and intellectuals of the 20th century, had more than a few thoughts that are relevant for today. Particularly in this article on living in the atomic age. And every time, I'm going to read a part of it, every time he says atomic bomb, put in place of that phrase coronavirus. Okay? Here I'm going to read to you part of it. In one way, we think a great deal too much of the atomic bomb. How are we to live in the atomic age? I am tempted to reply, if you lived in the 16th century, the plague would have visited you if you lived in London almost every year. Or if you lived in the Viking Age, raiders from Scandinavia could very likely land and cut your throat any night. Indeed, we already are living in an age of cancer, an age of syphilis, an age of paralysis, an age of air raids, an age of railway accidents, an age of motor accidents. In other words, do not let us begin by exaggerating the novelty of our situation. Believe me, dear sir or madam, you and all whom you love were already sentenced to death before the atomic bomb was invented, and quite a high percentage of us were going to die in unpleasant ways. We had indeed one very great advantage over our ancestors, anesthetics. It is perfectly ridiculous to go about whimpering, his words, to go about whimpering and drawing long faces because the scientists have added one more chance of painful and premature death to a world which already bristled with such chances, and in which death itself was not a chance at all, but a certainty. This is the first point to be made. And the first action to be taken is to pull ourselves together. If we're all going to be destroyed by an atomic bomb, let that bomb, when it comes, find us doing sensible and human things, like praying, working, teaching, reading, listening to music, bathing the children, playing tennis, chatting to our friends over a pint and a game of darts, not huddled together like frightened sheep and thinking about bombs. They may break our bodies. A microbe can do that. But they need not dominate our minds. Let me read that last line again. They may not break our bodies. A microbe could do that. But they need not dominate our minds. Now, you don't have to agree with everything that C.S. Lewis said. And a virus is quite different from an atomic bomb. I get that. But I think this is his basic point, that this is not a new situation we're living in. It really isn't. Not as far as human history is concerned. This is not a novelty. Just because we live in the 21st century doesn't mean we are the exception to the rule. Regardless, though, and this is an understatement, we are experiencing a massive disruption to our way of life, aren't we? Yeah. And we are receiving a reminder we are quite human and quite frail. And one day, like every other person who has ever walked this good green earth, we're going to die. It's part of the cycle. But as followers of Christ, we do trust in Jesus, that one day we will rise with him. You know, I love it where C.S. Lewis invites us just to be human. To be doing sensible things like praying and reading and washing our children, listening to great music, just being with friends, having a pint, whatever. Reminds me of what Martin Luther, a German theologian back in the 1500s, once said, you know, joy is an act of defiance. It is. Against the powers of evil. Against Satan, against disease, against death. Against the chaos of economic tribulation. Joy is a way to stand up against the onslaught of evil today. We can do that. We have it within us. I know you do. So I do think C.S. Lewis's invitation to us to rise up and be human is echoed by Paul from prison when he wrote, "Rejoice in the Lord always." He wouldn't have said that if he didn't believe we couldn't do it. And rejoice, you know, not just when it's easy, or when you feel like it, or when everything's going well, but maybe especially when things are falling apart. And you're scared, and the news is dire, and you don't know what's going to happen or when it will happen. You know? And you're kind of in limbo for weeks, months, even years to come. Rejoice. Choose joy. You can do that. I know you can. I've seen it within you. And do it not just as a feeling, but as an act of your will. A defiance against the powers that be, against the circumstances that are. I'd like to end kind of in a prayer time here, okay? So like yesterday in my devotion, I'm going to ask you to just take a deep breath. Breathe in the presence of God, okay? Breathe out all that anxiety, all that doubt, all that fear you may have. It's just drawing you down. And release it to God. And be present to your body, to what you're feeling, the anxiety in your chest, in your gut, the sadness in your belly, the grief in your heart. Become aware of your body. Rest in God's presence and the love that's all around you and within you. Find that deep center in your spirit where your spirit touches God. Draw to mind whatever sadness and melancholy or fear you may have. Let it come to the surface. Don't judge it. Don't ignore it. Don't deny it. Certainly don't obsess over it. And as quickly as it comes out, just as quickly turn it over to Jesus and receive in its place the joy of our Lord, who some have called the happiest person ever to have lived on the face of the earth. Embrace the joy of the Spirit. Not a happy, clappy kind of joy, that doesn't take serious the gravity of the moment, but rather a joy that's in spite of the gravity of the moment. A joy that's not in denial of it. A joy that is strong and will face up to it. Embrace that joy with a radical acceptance and wisdom, so that you may have the grace and the strength and the courage to rejoice in the Lord always. First Christian Church, I want to end with a benediction from the third letter of John. It's near the end of the New Testament. And the writer of that third letter of John says this, as I say to you, Beloved, I pray that all may go well with you, and that you may be in good health, as it goes well with your soul. Peace to you all. God bless you.